Freemasons. The difference between operative Masons and speculative Masons is that speculative Masons, what we call today the Freemasons, were non-working Masons who were also admitted to operative lodges as honorary members. The first record of a non-operative Mason being allowed into a Masonic lodge is in 1645. Operative Masons used to also meet in lodges. This continued until the speculative Masons and their lodges became more and more common, eventually leading to the first Grand Lodge in London in 1717. Modern Freemasonry is called speculative Freemasonry because it is a speculative science from an operative art form. Speculative by definition means engaged in, expressing, or based on conjecture rather than knowledge. Operative Masons were those who actually worked with stone. Modern-day Knight Templars are not to be confused with the medieval Knight Templars. There is no evidence these two are connected in any way. The first American-born Freemason is said to be Jonathan Belcher, who was made a Freemason in 1704 while on a visit to England. The first President of the United States was George Washington, and he was also a Freemason. He was initiated on November 4, 1752, passed to Fellowcraft on March 3, 1753, and raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason on August 4, 1753. Most of the participants of the Boston Tea Party were actually Freemasons. It is believed they had been secretly planning the raid for many months inside Masonic lodges. The first African-American Freemason was none other than Prince Hall. He was also given the honor of being the first Grand Master of the Negro Grand Lodge, which was later renamed to a more appropriate Prince Hall Grand Lodge. 31 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. According to rumors, unconfirmed sources, 17 U.S. vice presidents were also Freemasons. If true, this puts the tally higher than the 15 U.S. presidents who were also Freemasons. Every U.S. president who came from Tennessee was a Freemason: Presidents Andrew Jackson, Andrew Johnson, and James K. Polk. For reasons unknown, Thomas Mortimer from Nebraska was raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason degree 34 years and 10 months after his entered apprentice degree, making it the longest wait between degrees currently known. The cornerstone of the Statue of Liberty in New York was laid by William A. Brodie, a Scots-American businessman and Grand Master of Masons of New York, on the 5th of August, 1884. Mason City in Lower, originally known as Shibboleth, is a city founded by several Freemasons. Thomas J. Shryack of Maryland held his office for a record 33 years. He also died whilst in office. In 1947, 11 Caldwell brothers made the 12th brother a Master Mason in Corinthian Lodge No. 96 in Ontario, Canada. J. A. Bonner was Master of Eureka Lodge No. 1060, and so were his 6 sons. In 1940, a Master Mason degree was delivered at 750 feet below sea level in the Morton Salt Mine at Grand Saline, Texas by Grand Saline Lodge No. 1269. An actual king, King Kalakaua of Hawaii, once acted as a Tyler when the 29th and 30th degree of the Scottish Rite were conferred in his own palace. Vance Swift was made a Mason by Pythagoras Lodge No. 355 at 26 years of age. He was 29 inches tall and weighed 34 pounds at the time. James E. Payne was made a Master Mason in Washington, D.C. at 92 years old. This is the oldest recorded age of becoming a Freemason, thus far. Arthur Smalley received his first section of his Master Mason degree when the lodge went on refreshment, and in the meantime, authorities had shut down the building for unknown reasons. This resulted in the first known case of a 2.5 degrees. The other half of the degree was given 2 weeks later. The 4th Duke of Athol was initiated, passed, raised, and installed as Master, then Grand Master, all in one day on March 1, 1775. The reason for this is unknown. Mozart, Haydn, Liszt, and Sibelius, amongst others, all composed music specifically for Masonic use. Before the OES was created, there were many organizations composed of Freemasons' relatives, such as Heroines of Jericho, the Holy Virgin, Good Samaritan, and others. On his trip to the moon in 1969, Freemason Buzz Aldrin carried with him the Masonic Supreme Council flag and even took it out on his moonwalk. There are many who claim Charles Darwin was a Freemason. However, there are no official records to prove he was actually a Mason. Hitler believed Freemasons were a tool of the Jews. Under the Nazi regime, it's estimated that between 80,000 and 200,000 Freemasons were murdered in concentration camps. Masonic lodges. The first permanent Masonic lodges as we know them today before the United Grand Lodge of England in 1717, started appearing in the 1600s. These were operative Masonic lodges which eventually became solely speculative. Apart from the first Grand Lodge of England that formed in 1717, there were other Grand Lodges which formed. However, it's the original United Grand Lodge of England, UGLE, that still stands. The oldest known Masonic lodge room is said to be St. John's Chapel in Edinburgh, Scotland, 1736, which belonged formerly and wholly to Lodge Canongate Kilwinning, but it is now owned by the Royal Order of Scotland and used as their headquarters. The oldest known Masonic lodge room in the United States is Prentice House, in Marblehead, Massachusetts, 1760. The oldest Masonic lodge building is Lodge Hall of Royal White Hart Lodge No. 2 in Halifax, North Carolina, 1771. 3 out of the 4 original lodges that first formed the United Grand Lodge of England are still in existence today. St. John's Lodge, in Philadelphia. Ledger for the year 1731 is the oldest Masonic lodge document in existence in the United States. Edinburgh Lodge No. 1, also known as Mary's Chapel, is said to be the lodge with the oldest records. Some of these records date back to the 3 LST of July, 1599. The first duly noted constituted lodge in America is St. John's Lodge in Boston, Massachusetts, on July 30, 1733. On that day, 18 men gathered at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern on King Street in Boston and pledged to be true to each other, to God, and to their king. In the United States, if there are 3 or more lodges in any state or territory with no current Grand Lodge, they may be free to organize one. The first title of the first African-American Grand Lodge was the African Grand Lodge of North America. In 1827, the African Grand Lodge declared its independence from the United Grand Lodge of England, as the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts had done 45 years earlier. In 1749, the first lodge was constituted in Norway in the city of Christiania, now known as Oslo. It was founded by Count Christian Conrad Daneskiold Lorvig, probably with the Danish King Frederick V of Denmark present at the initiation ceremony. The first Masonic lodge established in Japan was at Yokohama in 1865 by the Grand Lodge of England. This lodge was called Yokohama Lodge No. 1092 and was very active for many years. The Order of the Eastern Star appeared on December 28, 1868, known as Alpha Chapter No. 1. It was established by lawyer and educator Rob Morris, a noted Freemason, but was only adopted and approved as an appendant body of the Masonic fraternity in 1873. The highest Masonic lodge in the world is on top of Cerro de Pasco in Peru, 14.208 feet above sea level. It's called the Roof of the World. Lodge No. 1094 under the Grand Lodge of Scotland. The highest lodge in the United States is Corinthian Lodge No. 42 at Kokomo, Colorado. On October 13, 1881, a fire destroyed the biggest part of Kokomo, including the lodge room. On January 11, 1882, with a special dispensation from Lonic Lodge No. 35, the lodge was convened. A regular meeting was held on January 21, 1882, and business resumed. In the Canal Zone, all land is owned by the U.S. government, except for one plot, which is a Masonic temple and stands by the permission of Congress. Masonic symbols. The symbols of Freemasons, such as the square and compasses, come from the operative stonemasons, cathedral builders, and comesines masters. Mentions of Masonic symbols can be found in the Bible. Lambskin, Peter chapter 1 verse 19, Proverbs chapter 27 verse 26, pot of incense, 2 Chronicles 4:22, Revelations 8-3, Exodus chapter 38 verse 3, Hebrews chapter 9.4, all-seeing eye, Proverbs chapter 15 verse 3, Psalms 11-4, Psalms 33-18, Anchor and Ark, Hebrews chapter 6 verse 19, Hebrews chapter 11 verse 7, Scythe, Job chapter 14 verse 2, Isaiah 38-10, sword pointing to naked heart, Street Luke chapter 2 verse 35, Acacia, Exodus chapter 27 verse 1. The symbolic covering of a lodge should be celestial or starry decked heaven. The sprig of acacia is used as an emblem in Freemasonry, originating from a Jewish custom of planting a branch of acacia vera on the grave. The acacia was esteemed as a sacred wood among the Hebrews, and it symbolizes the immortality of the soul. The beehive is another common emblem of Freemasonry because it reveals the power the collective can achieve when faced with a single task. The concept behind the hive is to gather people with similar interests who can cooperate, as work is vital in Freemasonry. To prevent errors, some Grand Lodges have replaced the black ball in the voting system with a black cube, which would be easier to identify in low light. Due to the voting in systems of speculative Masonic lodges, one can confidently say that the government system used by Freemasons is democratic. Freemasonry is said to be veiled in allegory, because its teachings and applications of those teachings are infinite in how they can be applied. Geometry and astronomy are two sciences that hold special reverence by Freemasons worldwide. The now infamous term, a beautiful system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, was coined by Samuel Hemming, the first senior Grand Warden of the United Grand Lodge of England. The term mystic tie stands for the spiritual tie not easily broken, a fellowship amongst Masons. The expression was used by poet, lyricist, and brother Robert Burns in his farewell to the Brethren of St. James Lodge, Tarbolton, Scotland. Charles Lindbergh, an American aviator, military officer, author, and inventor, always wore a square and compasses on his jacket, for good luck. Lindbergh, as a Freemason, represents a long line of explorers and adventurers down through the ages who were members of the craft. Contrary to popular belief, the Great Seal of the United States has no Masonic significance. Together, the two sides of the Great Seal are a unique combination of images from nature and culture. But no organization has an exclusive association with any of these symbols. The Royal Arch year is calculated by adding 530 to the current year. Originally, the ritual was not called the ritual, it was called the work, because it was the preservation of the activities, practices, and customs of the operative Masons. There are 5 rites in the American system of Freemasonry: the Ancient Craft, the Royal Arch, Cryptic Freemasonry, the Templars, and the Scottish Rite. The first 3 degrees, A, F, C and MM as we know them today, were not always there. It was only till about 10 years after the first Grand Lodge formed that the 3 degrees came to be, and finally, the 4th degree, the Royal Arch degree, was added. There are 3 known ways one can become a Freemason. These are by association, by becoming an honorary member, or by being elected and initiated. The Scottish Rite was formed in the United States in Charleston, South Carolina, on May 31, 1801. The Supreme Council at Charleston, as it was sometimes called, was the first Supreme Council of the 33 degrees in the world. The name, Scottish Rite, came from one of the degrees founded in France called Scottish Masters. When the Supreme Council was organized in Charleston, the name, Scottish Rite, was adopted. Many of the Scottish Rite degrees were actually adopted from other rites and orders. The original constitutions of the Scottish Rite were, supposedly, written by Frederick II, the Great, King of Prussia. Frederick was an enlightened thinker, monarch, and Freemason who labored to end censorship and instituted many other reforms to the benefit of humanity. The Scottish Rite held its headquarters in Charleston until it was moved to Washington, D.C. in 1870. This is now called House of the Temple. The 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite can only be conferred by outstanding merit, not by petition. The degree is conferred on members who have made major contributions to society or to Masonry in general. There is no uniform manner of wearing a Masonic apron. It varies in different jurisdictions. A Masonic apron should only be worn on Masonic duty, such as in a lodge, a funeral of a brother, or at a laying of a cornerstone. Speculative Masons wear white gloves as an emblem of clean hands, but operative Masons wore gloves to protect their hands. There are no regulations on how, when, or if a Masonic ring should be worn. However, it is customary to wear a ring with the points of the square and compasses pointing to your heart. While there are many theories, no one really knows where Freemasonry originated from. Some might even say the origins of Freemasonry are beyond historical records. The earliest known mention, appearance of Freemasonry in America is from a rock dated September 6, 1606, with some markings that closely resemble the Masonic square and compasses. This stone was found in Nova Scotia in 1827. The printing of the word Freemason first appeared in the Boston Newsletter on January 5, 1718. In 1723, the first anti-Masonic group, called the Gormagans, was formed by expelled Freemason Philip Wharton. To join this group, also believed to be descended from ancient Chinese society, you first had to leave Freemasonry and renounce it publicly. Speaking of anti-Masonry, Queen Elizabeth is said to have once sent military force with the intent of breaking up the Grand Lodge. On March 6, 1775, W.M. Master of Lodge No. 411 Sergeant J.B. Batt conferred for the first time, the 3 Masonic degrees to 15 African American men. This was the first time black men were admitted into Freemasonry, at least in the United States. The infamous Prince Hall was one of the 15 African American members who received their degree on the 6th of March 1775. On January 27, 1800, George Washington's urn was presented to the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts by his widow. This is now called the Golden Urn. On August 23, 1879, Lodge number 239 in France held a meeting in a giant balloon over Paris where they initiated a candidate. April 23 is a day celebrated in English Freemasonry commemorating the Articles of Union between the ancients and the moderns. On November 1, 1923, Charles H. Callahan used the same trowel used by George Washington to lay the cornerstone of the national capital to lay the cornerstone at the George Washington Masonic National Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia. On May 23, 1928, in Madison Lodge No. 93, Alfred, Frederick, and Harold Budd became the first triplets to join Freemasonry together. In 1943, Hollywood made a Masonic motion picture called Your Son Is My Brother. The first Masonic book printed in America was Benjamin Franklin's reprint of Anderson's Constitutions in 1734. Only 17 copies were printed, and it's said to be the rarest Masonic book ever. The Bible used for George Washington's inauguration was borrowed from St. John's Lodge No. 01. The Bible is still in possession of the lodge to this day and can be seen in the Lodge Museum. The Freemasons magazine and General Miscellany was the first ever Masonic magazine published in the United States in 1811. The infamous and highly controversial Masonic writer Albert Pike is said to have written hundreds of Masonic manuscripts by hand in the 1800s. There have been approximately 100,000 books published about Freemasonry. King Solomon. Solomon, one of Freemasonry's most prominent figures, was born 997 BC to David and Bathsheba. He then became King Solomon 977 BC. The name Solomon actually means peace. King David, King Solomon's father, gave him this name in anticipation of the peaceful years to follow. The infamous Solomon's Temple was actually King David's idea. Unfortunately, since David was a man of war, he was not permitted to build it. Thus, he gave the task to his son King Solomon. The construction of King Solomon's Temple started when King Solomon was just 25 years old. The name of the stonemasons who worked on King Solomon's Temple were called Sons of Light. Hiram Abiff, another prominent figure in Freemasonry, is a widow's son from the tribe of Naphtali who came to aid King Solomon in the construction of his new temple. When the temple was completed, King Solomon brought over the Ark of the Covenant from his father's house and placed it inside a special inner room named Kodesh HaKodashim, Holy of Holies. When the priests emerged from the holy place after placing the Ark there, the temple was filled with a cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. The Temple of Solomon is said to have been situated on top of Mount Moriah, and it took approximately 7.5 years to build. It then stood for an additional 435 years before it was destroyed forever. Solomon's temple was eventually destroyed in 586 BC by King Nebuchadnezzar, during his siege on Jerusalem.